One of the world's most popular streamers, Asmongold, recently found himself in hot water over a controversial take on the Israel-Palestine conflict. He claimed he doesn't have much sympathy for Gaza given the population's views on Jews and the fundamentals of Sharia law. But perhaps the most contentious point he made, he called this culture inferior. Let me make this clear. Dehumanizing an entire population or dismissing innocent lives, regardless of the conflict, is wrong. And if that wasn't his intention, it was phrased poorly. However, where Asmongold does have a point is in his criticism of Sharia law. It's a system of oppression that adversely impacts millions of women, apostates, non-believers, and homosexuals. How do I know? Because I was born and raised in one of the few countries in the world that claims to be 100% Muslim, though that's far from the truth. I know several people who've left the faith, myself included. The Maldives, famous for its beautiful white beaches and luxury resorts, but less known for exporting the highest number of fighters per capita to ISIL during the Syrian civil war. Behind the postcard perfect beaches lies a nation increasingly influenced by Salafism, a strict, puritanical version of Islam that seeks to revive the practices of the Prophet Muhammad. That means Sharia law is woven into its legal system, and that immediately made my situation, well, not so good. Best case scenario, imprisonment. Worst case scenario, the capital punishment. All because I simply do not believe in any religion. I think this perhaps makes me better suited to defend the following point. All cultures and even religions should be criticized. And if it has bad fundamentals, we should be able to call a spade a spade. Cultural relativity is a silly idea, especially if these fundamentals dehumanize and actively punish people for something as simple as being gay or not believing in a religion. That doesn't mean you're attacking the people who practice it, especially considering Islam isn't a race. It's a religion, and a political one at that. Take apostasy for example. Under Islam, apostasy attracts capital punishment. Here's a map that shows countries that actively follow this rule today. Not 200-300 years ago, but today. Imagine this, especially if you grew up as a Christian in the West. You one day leave Christianity in the UK, for example, and suddenly the police are at your door, ready to take you to the gallows if you didn't revert back. Any culture or religion that has this built into its laws is reprehensible. That is a fact. And it's far from the only example. Let me fire off a few more. Stealing can result in the punishment of amputation. Certain countries still prescribe the capital punishment by stoning for acts of adultery. Being gay in the following countries can get you jailed, flogged, or again, the capital punishment. In many of these countries, women are worth half a man in legal testimony and inherit far less than their male counterparts. In fact, Islamic majority countries rank the worst in almost every list when it comes to women's equality and rights. Criticizing Islam or its prophet can lead to imprisonment or worse, capital punishment. Remember what happened to Salman Rushdie, the creators of South Park and also Charlie Hebdo? I made a detailed video on this right here. And historically, in lands which Muslim imperialists conquered, Jews and Christians were forced to pay a special tax and live as second-class citizens. If they didn't, they once again faced the gallows. Now, compare these to the West. Would you like the same laws applied in the US, UK, or Australia? Not only is this a deeply flawed culture, they represent a violation of basic human rights, violations that are happening right now. Critiquing these laws isn't about attacking people. It's about wanting better for them. It's about advocating for freedom, for dignity, for the right to live without fear of persecution. Because no one should face capital punishment for their beliefs, their identity, or their love. Speaking of love, if you're enjoying this video so far, please show your love by subscribing and giving the video a thumbs up. Asmongold made a point about Muslim views about non-believers. I'm not sure how much he knows about Islamic colonialism and the suffering it caused millions of people, but he's not entirely wrong. And such attitudes towards non-believers is deeply rooted in Islamic scripture and history. For instance, there's a well-known hadith that says the final hour or judgment day won't come until Muslims eliminate all Jews. This is taught as a prophecy of the end times, from young children to adults in Islamic countries all over the world. In what world isn't this genocidal? And it's not just about Jews. The Quran specifically warns Muslims not to take Jews or Christians as friends. This creates a fundamental distrust of non-Muslims ingrained in Islamic teachings. Look at the history of the Banu Qurayza tribe. They were a Jewish tribe living in Medina at the time of Prophet Muhammad. When they were accused of breaking an alliance, what happened? The men got put to the sword, somewhere between 600 and 900 of them, while the women and children were sold into slavery. This attitude towards non-Muslims is evident even post-Muhammad. The Jewish philosopher Maimonides, in his famous letter to the Jews of Yemen, wrote about the persecution Jews faced under Islamic rule. He said, "Never did a nation humiliate, degrade, debase, and hate us as much as they." Think about that. A man who lived through Christian persecution still saw Islamic rule as the worst. And speaking of persecution, what about the eradication of Christian and Jewish populations in the Middle East? We often hear about the Crusades as this horrific event in history. But the Crusades were a response to Islamic conquest. For centuries, Islamic empires had been expanding, swallowing up Christian lands. From the 7th century onwards, Islamic forces took over Jerusalem, Syria, North Africa, Spain, and even parts of France. The Crusades were an attempt to defend against that. Yet, despite that history, today we see little to almost no Christian or Jewish populations left in the very countries where they once thrived. Look at Egypt, Lebanon, Iraq, Syria, countries that once had significant Jewish and Christian communities. Now, they're almost completely gone. In Iraq, the Christian population has dwindled from over 1.5 million in the 1990s to fewer than 200,000 today. In Egypt, the Coptic Christians are constantly under threat despite making up around 10% of the population. In Saudi Arabia, it's illegal to practice any religion other than Islam. Not just discouraged, illegal. In most Islamic majority countries, non-Muslims are often denied the right to openly practice their faith. Look at the Pew Research Center's findings. Countries with the highest levels of religious restrictions are overwhelmingly Islamic majority nations. Now, compare that to the West. Here, even Muslims have the freedom to build mosques, practice their faith, and live without fear of persecution. That's why it's critical to understand the difference between criticizing a system and attacking people. We're talking about systems of oppression, systems that have, for centuries, subjugated, expelled, or eliminated those who don't follow Islam. And we're talking about those systems being enforced today. And yes, I certainly do believe that if certain countries in the Middle East had the technology and the weapons to eradicate Israel, they almost certainly would have done so by now. It's not that they don't want to, it's that they can't. They've tried in the past and lost. Look, Asmongold's remarks might have been phrased poorly, but there's truth in what he's pointing out. No matter how uncomfortable it may be, this is the harsh reality. You may not like hearing it, but it doesn't make it any less true. And it's a reality that I've unfortunately experienced firsthand. If you enjoyed the video, remember to subscribe and give it a thumbs up. I have a number of videos exploring similar topics, which you can check out here. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.